This is the Marketing Agency Power Hour, and I'm your host, Cal Wilder. Each week, we'll power through discussions on business challenges, success stories, and game-changing strategies. This show is sponsored by SmartBooks, provider of bookkeeping and accounting for marketing agencies. Let's get started. Today, I'm excited to be speaking with two guests. And also to hear more about how they approach running their firm, which is a little bit different than how many other agency owners run their firms. They're champions of people-first business and creative efficiency, proving that mission-driven work can both be impactful and operationally excellent. They are visionary leaders at the forefront of the nonprofit marketing industry, building some of the most accessible and sustainable digital experiences in the sector. They're the co-founders and co-owners of DevCollaborative, Johanna and Erin Fogel. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So jumping right into the discussion, let me ask you, what's the single most powerful strategy driving success in your firm?
I would say that when we started, when we came together back in 2012 or so, Erin and I had both worked in and with nonprofit organizations for most of our careers up to that point. And we had seen a lot of things already in that time. We'd seen a lot of organizations we cared about, whose missions we cared about, spending a lot of money on websites that were just too much, more than they needed, or they were poorly constructed, or they just weren't focusing on the right things. And that made us kind of mad. And we started talking about what we cared about, which is helping to make organizations that do important mission work run more smoothly. And how would we do that? And so really we were talking about our values. Like, we want people who are devoting their careers to making change to be able to do so. And there's a little place where we could maybe make that better because we had the expertise in building websites. And so it really started with our values. And we wanted to build websites that were accessible. Accessibility was not an afterthought, so that mission organizations could serve all of the people that they could possibly reach, whether or not they had disabilities or not. And also for those websites to last a really long time and be sturdy and be able to be enhanced as the organization evolves. Something that's not disposable. In the for-profit sector, you see a lot of people rebuilding websites every year or 2 or 3. Our websites last 3 to, and I don't recommend this, 10 years, generally speaking, when we are able to build them properly from the get-go. And so the other thing that was really important to us was that we had all this expertise, and we also love to learn. And we're a learning organization. That's one of our values. And we love to share expertise back and then also participate in community and learn from others. So that's where Erin and I met. We met at the N10 Nonprofit Technology Network, nten.org, at their conference many years ago. And I was running a workshop about becoming a professional nonprofit technologist when I met Erin. And because I was sharing back what I'd learned being a nonprofit technologist, and sharing back with the community has led to us getting work. And so as we started to build a practice, we just kept doing that. We kept participating in the nonprofit technology, the WordPress, and the Drupal communities, open source communities, technology communities, and just in the general nonprofit communities around us. And giving back would often lead to more work. And we really wanted to make a company that is a place where we didn't feel yucky getting up and working at. And so we leaned really hard into that, and it kept working. And here we are, some amount of years later.
Right. You've described to me how you spend very, very little money on, marketing to bring in new business. You've really taken kind of an open book approach and engaging with community and sharing what you both have learned over the years. And that's effectively how you do your marketing.
Yeah, I would say that every now and then we'll get a client who will say, "Oh, I met you at a conference 8 years ago." Um, and we didn't have the money then, but now we're ready to talk about a project. So it's really those little organic marketing, networking, word of mouth that has helped, you know, spur the business.
And you came out of kind of working in the nonprofit space before starting DevCollab, but so it might have felt natural to continue focusing on that space, but that probably took some courage to do because you probably had opportunities to do work for other industries and like you probably decided to turn away some revenue that probably would have been nice to have at the time, but maybe you didn't need to have it because it distracted from your longer term vision and your values.
Yeah, I would say that so I was always on the business side of the nonprofits. I was in the consulting role. And this is going to sound strange, and maybe it speaks to your point of how we might be a little different, is that one of the advantages of working with nonprofits was really the ability to work with the decision makers and have a much more hands-on approach working with with our clients. And that is different than some of our experiences in the for-profit sector, which is a much larger hierarchy of access to decision makers. Um, we also were able to not have to be on the cutting edge of technology. We often don't want our nonprofits to be the early adopters, because it's not a really good approach for being sustainable, right? You want to test how the technology is going to work and how it's adopted before you jump on that bandwagon.
Let somebody else work out the kinks first.
Totally. So those factors were enabled, like those characteristics, right? Enabled us in this industry a little bit better because we didn't have to. The cost of some of the work and the revenue was low. The revenue was lower, but some of the cost was lower too, because we weren't needing to be as cutting edge as some of the the similar websites being built in the for profit space.
The nonprofit sector is always needs to be a little behind because their budgets are smaller and they need things to last longer. And I was a web developer for many years. Now I just do sales and kind of thought leadership and team management. But that was a big reason why we stayed in the nonprofit sector. We did have some for-profit clients in the beginning, um, because we needed work. And we did find, I found, as somebody who's been doing sales um, all along, for us, is that it did really split our energy, and it made it harder to articulate our value to just not have a focus. So that was a piece of business advice to, pick a niche. I can't say the word now. Um, that, to stick with that. And that did actually make things easier in a lot of ways, even though it does limit who we'll talk to some degree.
And I think it's a bit too, it's not just nonprofit or for profit, like how a client runs their financial statements and what kind of like how they're structured is not really what we were all about. It was about the values of that client. So we would more soon work with a progressive business than we would to, a not progressive nonprofit. The value is more important than just saying you have to be a nonprofit.
Yes.
So if there are people listening to this who are interested in kind of taking a similar go-to-market approach, not necessarily in the nonprofit space, but in some particular niche, through kind of engaging, contributing, sharing information, helping other people, not spending money on, outbound marketing and salespeople and all that, but do it, more organically, personally, with a very low, nominal marketing budget. Do you have any advice or tactics that you might recommend to them?
I would say making sure that you have you diversify the sources of revenue. So when we were really small, we were just building our websites for clients, and then we had relationships with other vendors to take over the support. And we realized after a few years that that meant that all of our clients were one and done, and we would never see them again. So we realized having our website build practice was important, but also having a source of recurring revenue with through retainers and support agreements, right, was actually a method to sustain us. So that was one area that really, that was really helpful to us. Another thing that was really helpful to us too was really making sure, really understanding the difference between our cash and our P&L statement. Because if we didn't have the cash to pay our our contractors or our employees, then we couldn't get the work done. But it was a cycle because we were in the beginning just getting paid from our clients, and only then would we be able to pay our workforce. So we started making sure that our contracts were structured with down payments. And when at a time when everyone was talking about being doing all your work on time and materials basis, we actually were switching more to a fixed price model. Because at that point, generating the cash and having confirmed, steady cash, in our pipeline was the most important. And so being able to have more than one revenue stream and be able to have a cash padding from which to work were, very helpful to us.
Yeah, that was practical. That was the practical answer. My answer is that I'm convinced that if you can't do organic sales and knowledge sharing based marketing unless that's really effective, unless you really know what you're talking about and you really care. I think what's worked is that we've stuck to things that we know well and care about and crafted this business based on those things. And those are those problems, those people I care about, those problems I care that I know how to solve for the people, the kind of people and kind of organizations that I care about. It's very easy for me to go in and talk to people fairly confidently because I do know what I'm talking about. And I think I've seen people try to do organic marketing when you can tell like they were just hired to do it and they're just kind of reading off a script that they've studied well, but I think that's pretty transparent. So just being genuine, I think it sounds really basic, but I see people not doing it aplenty. So wanted to throw that in there.
Okay, thank you. So we've talked about, how you deliver success to clients, but how do you define success for your own firm at DevCollab? How do you measure it in terms of, growth or profit or lifestyle or, those kinds of factors?
Certainly, from day one, we set out to define a company that wasn't going to be a 40-hour a week company, which from a accounting and forecasting perspective, that has continued to make difficulty in how we plan things, because all most software tools are set up based on a 40-hour work week. But it allowed us to work with people who were interested in doing more with their 40 hours a day, other than their primary work. So we've always worked with people who they could be, parents who are, raising kids at the same time, people who are authors, people who is a EMT, would get called out on like an ambulance run right in the middle of a meeting. But we wanted to be able to offer those types of work-life balance in reality, right? Like you could hold this job and we will support you being an EMT.
I bet there are not very many other marketing firms that could say that.
Probably not. And being able to offer that, has led to us retaining our team for a very long time. We've had some turnover, but I think the biggest thing is that there might be less of a burnout because folks are really able to balance, other pursuits. Um, so no one works 40 hours. We talk about work-life balance and like we put it into practice as well. Um, Johanna, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think we really try to foster a work environment again that we would want to be in. So we're a learning organization. Everyone gets to go to at least one conference a year if they want to. Um, we really aim for that. We give everyone some sick time, some vacation time, some holiday time. We really urge them to take it. We document our processes so that people can step away, so that other people can cover them. Because if you don't document processes, that is a blocker to someone else being able to step in and do your job so that you can get some rest. The tech industry and the nonprofit industry both have really high levels of burnout, as does agency work, right? And so I think um, something that we want is a place where we can work where the temperature's just turned down a little bit from what it is and sort of your typical environment. One example of a choice we made early on when we started supporting websites, we um, we partnered with a hosting company that has 24-hour support. So because most websites kind of emergencies when a website goes down is a hosting issue. And we, we tell clients that we will do our best to help them when they're in a jam, but we take weekends off and we go home at night, or we go into the other room in most of our cases because we work from home, um, and spend time with our families and our pets and our hobbies and our lives. And because we can't be on call 24/7 and deliver consultative, high quality, full brain partnership to our clients. It's not possible. And so that is a choice we made to help, keep a work-life balance.
So I suspect some listeners may be a little envious of how you're pulling this off, or a little bit curious about how you're pulling this off. And you've got to be able to, as a business, afford to be able to pull this off, right? And so I'm curious, how do you go about approaching and think about and managing the finances for the firm?
Um, I mentioned a few things earlier just related to, making sure we had cash and making sure that we had different revenue streams. I think another aspect is really understanding our goals. So along with offering that, work-life balance, we've also had the goal to not scale tremendously. We still wanted growth, right? We want to be able to increase salaries, increase benefits, but we've always maintained that we don't want to be a company that is bigger than say 10 people. And because, there really is no such thing as an 11-person, configuration, it would become 20 people, right? If so, it's always been a balance of making sure we have enough projects to keep everyone busy and fulfilled, but not take on too many projects, so that we don't have to hire very quickly and then let people go. So knowing our goals and knowing that we aren't trying to scale, and that hasn't been easy because it has meant that we've needed to shuffle things around. Um, project managers always talk about, the triangle of like quality, schedule, and budget. Um, we've really run the business that way too, and in terms of how we've had like our clients. So we have we talk to our clients about schedules, and we have to be flexible with our schedules. They understand that um, part of the agreement of working with us is that there's some flexibility, and so when financial situations affect our schedule, right? We often will shift our work in order to accommodate those finances. And what I mean by that is, if we do suddenly get a call for a project that has like a good margin and needs our attention right away, and we have another project that is a slow and steady project, we might talk to that client and make that project more slow, and just take a bit more time so that we could squeeze in our schedule, a high return client. I think that being able to do that is because as an owner, I'm able to be hands-on, I have hands-on oversight into a lot of the work. Um, but it's required a lot of flexibility, and it's required a lot of just a lot of trust all around to be able to manage it this way. Um, I think another success factor too had to do with shifting from contractors to employees. We actually, um, we've gone through various stages. Right now, we're 9 full-time employees, with 1 full-time contractor. But it wasn't always that mix. For a period of time, I think we were like 4 employees and 6 contractors. And there are pros and cons to what we're able to deliver with both of those models. And understanding those differences has really helped us as well, because we've been able to adjust our delivery model, based on who we have available to do the work.
I think one of the things you said about being able to have some flexibility with schedule seems to speak to the strength of the relationships you have with your clients, that they're willing to be flexible and a little bit of give and take, and knowing that when they need you to put them first, you'll put them first, but sometimes you've got to put somebody else first.
Yep. We talk about prioritization from day one with our clients because it comes up in budget. And what we always say is, no matter how big your budget is or how small your budget is, everyone's on a budget. And everyone has a tremendous wish list of things that they want to achieve. And it is very often that your budget and your wish list just don't match. And we want to be your partner, and we want to understand your budget, and we want to understand your wish list, and we will work with you to make the best decision, to make sure you get the biggest bang for the buck. And because that is one of the first conversations we have with them, I think that helps shape the conversation for the full project. So if your deadline is your number one priority, we will meet that deadline, but you might need to deprioritize a feature, and save that for after launch. And our project managers and our developers are just, even when from the moment of hiring them, we hire people who um, you know, are able to communicate very well, and explain these things to our clients.
Yeah, and I'd also add that we do a pretty intensive vetting. We've gotten better and better at vetting clients and sales. Um, it's definitely like we're trying to win work, but we're also trying to find the right match. And my goal is always our goal together, because everybody works on sales to some degree, is to find really good match clients. So we're trying to find clients who want a consultative partner, who really want a high level of communication and collaboration, who want some transparency, and who are understanding about trade-offs and sort of kind of really represent that, being in a working in a nonprofit is often about like just kind of making do with what you have as best you can. And the folks who understand that the best are our most successful clients. And most of our clients we've been partners with for many years. We have many, many clients that we've retained for many years. We have pretty low turnover with our clients. So I know that we're doing something right there in the vetting process. Um, there's times when you take work that you look back and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have, maybe this wasn't the best match, but that has gotten less and less the case for us. We've been better at filling our pipeline with really good matches.
And from a firm accounting and financial management perspective, I think you've done a few key things and kind of, got the basic building blocks in place that allow you to, continue to remain a values-driven organization while being profitable and, um, you know, having control over your finances, right? You've got a revenue forecasting system in place. We've got, a good chart of accounts with consistent monthly financial reporting, so you know how the business is performing financially. And I think you've set some profit targets. And having worked with you personally a couple years back, I can validate what you're saying is true. I mean, I remember when I first started working with you on the budget, and I saw 30 hours a week per employee. I'm thinking, is that 30 hours a week of billable hours out of a 40-hour week? And came to a person, no, that's 30 hours a week, and that might only be 22 hours or something of quote unquote billable hours, right? Um, and when you set profit targets, there's a range that's reasonable, but you were never stretching for the high end of the range to try to get
Right.
every last hour out of an employee or every last dollar out of a client, right? So you got the good basics in place. I feel like they'll give you the information you need to run the business while still trying to fulfill your values.
We'd be a lot more profitable if if we were to tweak some of the decisions we made. We're not going to tweak them, but um, it's it's something about if and anyone is listening and wondering about doing a shorter work week right across the board. At the end of the day, it still takes people a certain amount of time to organize themselves and participate in meetings and be part of a team. And we don't reduce that time necessarily when you're working less hours, which basically does mean that there's a lot less billable hours on the table to generate revenue. But we make up for that by really making sure that the work that is put in is time well spent and focused work. And that's a quality that you really need to vet when you're hiring when you're hiring people, is that your on time needs to be on, like you need to be focused.
Yeah. I will just add that this came up in our prior conversations. Like we before SmartBooks, we worked with a different accountancy that was not accommodating. They were a more traditional business. They did business consulting and accounting, and they really pushed us to think about becoming a business that would scale. And that ultimately wasn't a really good fit for us, because one of the most important pieces in getting to where we are today, 10 official years as a business now, and feeling pretty good even with the market being a little funky right now, is that Erin did put in so much work with SmartBooks to build a forecasting model that allows us to see, like, what is the margin, the margins that we were told by every business expert prior to coming to SmartBooks were just like margins for the default scenario, where they assume you want to scale and you care more about making bank on your business than just having sustainable work-life balance and a place you want to go to work. And what was great about working with SmartBooks was that you did help us build the tool that we needed in order to understand how to like look at our business and see levers to press where we could adjust things to make them a little bit better. How to monitor when things were getting a little bit worse and have some time to prepare for how to deal with that. And that has been really wonderful. And that is something that I thank Erin and SmartBooks for, both of you.
Yeah, I do have to plug my book since we're kind of at a point in the conversation where that makes sense. Our approach, though, the financial operating system for marketing agencies, but the first step is, identifying your why, because we need to know what you as business owners are trying to accomplish by owning the business before we can go about setting any, performance metrics and targets and saying whether some, results are good or bad. We need to know, what are you trying to accomplish? And then we can measure results against that. So, you're not trying to accomplish, 25% EBITDA margins based on your values and objectives. We're going to set a target that's aligned with your values and objectives. That's not going to be 25% EBITDA, right? So it's all about, our approach, my approach is figuring out what you as the business owner are trying to accomplish, and then going from there to design the accounting systems and financial reporting and metrics and targets and everything against those objectives.
Yeah. The funny thing is that one other thing that we notice is that our business is slower, I think, than not slower, like the response of how things move is slower
Yeah.
because of what our clients are. And so another, just a small way that that adjustment was made is that we can't always look at monthly financials because if we look at when I look at monthly financials, um, sometimes you want to panic because it doesn't look so good. But the way clients end up paying us and the way we sign work and the time from contract signing to project kickoff, those are all factors that are going to weigh into what a particular month looks like. And if you go only month by month, sometimes you're not getting the full understanding. And so understanding that is very important, for us.
Exactly. Anything can happen in any given month. So,
Yeah.
unless a business model has perfect recurring revenue, it's usually also very helpful to look at more of a trailing 3-month basis when the ins and outs in any given month kind of even out.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, ask you, we're talking about like all the great things you've done, but there must be some challenges, and you alluded to some funkiness in the marketplace these days. But what's something or some things that are challenges or getting in the way of how the success that you want to be having these days?
I would say currently what comes to mind is obviously nonprofits are deeply affected by the current political situation. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the market as a result of that. So that's really challenging. And it's kind of, it hasn't really happened in this particular way to this degree until this current moment. So that's concerning. We, and it's not just that orgs are having their funding cut. It's also that they're worried about having their funding cut. That also changes the way that they make decisions, right? And already, as we just said, like the nonprofit sector kind of moves on a geological timescale, and which is again why having SmartBooks customize our models is so important to us. So we've got that challenge happening. We also have the challenge of the fact that we work in technology, and we work with open source technology, which means we're basically work with Drupal and WordPress, which are the two largest, most well used content management systems, or a software that you use to build a website in the world. And we use them because they're the two best, but they change and evolve more quickly than than a geological time scale. So the combination of spending slowdown and changes to in technology, that can create a really challenging landscape to make any predictions across. Folks might have heard recently that the founder of WordPress kind of just lost it a little bit and had kind of a tantrum and like shut off some servers, and people couldn't update their websites, and that's the kind of thing that you know uh it can happen in a proprietary company for sure, and it has, and that's actually almost more dangerous because tons and tons and tons of people have copies of WordPress, so it's never going to be lost and shut down in a black box. But it can be really challenging to keep clients educated about how things are changing in the tech landscape, keep them moving forward without pushing them in some sort of financially unsustainable direction, and then fielding all this sort of turbulence and uncertainty around funding. Those are the two biggest challenges I can think of off the top of my head at the moment.
I would agree. I think everything. I think it comes back. I think it all comes back to that. Because even decision making is slower because of it. There's just more fear about spending. So I think those are the biggest ones. I think internally, some other the other threats to our model, right? Also is, a lot of similar companies are outsourcing, offshoring their work, and we're committed to not offshoring our work, or working with like offshore companies in particular. And so when our peer organizations are able to have developers working at a fraction of the cost, they're obviously able to have a bigger margin on that work than we have. So that is a threat. And I think not wanting, like, still sticking true to our belief that this is the market we want to serve, is a bit of a tension, only because there could be other opportunities that we're missing because we're so steadfast in wanting to work in this niche. And so I think we see other companies diversifying and going into different verticals. And so where we're putting our effort is to even narrow it down within the vertical of nonprofit. Nonprofit is big, right? So, an effort to narrow down which part of nonprofit space will have budget. So we're focusing our energy there, in as a way to, overcome any of those challenges that we foresee.
Makes sense. Those are definitely some big challenges. If there's anybody in the audience who could share some experiences or insight into how they've navigated similar challenges, please reach out to Erin and Johanna. What excites you about the future despite these challenges? There must be something exciting for you.
I mean, the work that we do continues to impress me. Like, it really impresses me that we could do what we do on the budgets that we have. Our team is always collaborating and coming up with new ideas. It excites me that we're contributing to the efforts of our clients. So, it's a bit secondhand, but we're contributing to their growth, and that, lets us go to sleep at night and feeling good about ourselves.
I think when we were speaking the other day, we spoke briefly about kind of some internal excitement about your team and
Mhm.
their development. Can you say anything about that?
Yeah, it's really satisfying to watch a team that cares about each other and communicates well, and you can watch them learning in real time. Like, we're a completely remote company. We use Slack for communication primarily, and Zoom, but we do get together a couple times a year. We have a retreat once a year in person for a few days. And also, we meet up at conferences, particularly to the developers. And also, we get together regionally, like when we can. So we have a little bit of in person time together. And I feel like, you know, um, because we're small enough, we've maintained this size on purpose, where we can each learn a little bit about the area of the business that we each work in. So, for example, Erin does these like really in-depth presentations to our whole team about our finances and how we're doing at our retreats. And we had one of those retreats in, I think, March. We met up in Chicago. Erin presented like, oh, here's where we're losing money. Here's where we're doing really well. Here's some ideas. Do we have any thoughts? Got people thinking. Then a few weeks later, I went with some developers to DrupalCon, which is like North America, where I help run the nonprofit summit there. And that's a huge conference with a couple thousand people. And um, our team came back to me at dinner one night and they were like, oh, I got this great idea that was related to the thing that we learned from Erin about our profit margin and how we could, you know, how we could make an efficiency that would help us. And I was like, and it was two of them, and they came from different like sessions with two different ideas, and they were good ideas. And watching, and then they came back and they shared them with the team on a meeting, and I was like, watching that is so satisfying for me. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to watch them grow. We're doing new projects. We're working with a new philanthropic organization. The philanthropy sector is going to be really important during this time of uncertain funding. And we're definitely looking to kind of grow a little bit. If there are any philanthropists out there who want to fund nonprofits and or need a website, definitely let us know.
We'll get your contact info for them later. So we've been talking a lot, we've been learning a lot from you about how you go about, running the business and making decisions around the business. Let's talk a little bit more about you and how you got to where you are. Years ago, did you think you'd be founding and running a business as an entrepreneur?
We'll put different answers here.
Totally different answers.
Um, I don't know. I don't know if I originally where my original thoughts were, but my undergrad degree was in communications, and I was going to go into audio sound production, but it felt too risky to do that post graduation, and this new thing called like the internet was evolving, and so I hopped on that bandwagon. As part of my degree, I was able to do that, and I fell in love with consulting, and the kind of thrill in project management and delivering results and working and collaborating with people. I got my MBA several years later in social entrepreneurship at Babson. Shout out to Babson. And I don't know if I sought out to be running a business, but I did seek wanting to create an environment that like worked for me and would work for my peers. And we did not, Johanna and I did not meet and say, let's write a business plan. It was, and we won't go bore you into the details here now, but it was a very small or long, I guess, organic process of let's take on a project together. I will manage it. You will develop it. We had another person also developing, and it worked out. It was a success. So we use that as a reference, and we got another project. And I was still supplementing income, working on freelancing in different places. But eventually, it just made sense to officialize it more and to kind of formalize it into a business. And now that's 12 years later, where we are.
Yeah. Our contracts got large enough that we needed to become a business. Yeah, I majored in religious studies. And I minored in poetry. And I thought I was going to write. I thought I was going to be a writer of some kind. And my first job out of college was I had to learn how to build HTML pages for the nonprofit I was working at the time. and I was also writing marketing copy for them. They were a publisher. And but I was like also building HTML, and because it was 1999, so you just had to teach yourself or learn from a peer. And right after that, I got hired at WGBH Public Broadcasting in Boston to be a web technologist formally, and they trained me. And so um, I was nonprofit staff web developer, and then after I moved to Western Massachusetts, where I live now, I left WGBH and I started working in a healthcare advocacy nonprofit statewide. And they were like, you can write and you can build websites. So be our webmaster and our lead grant writer. And so I did that for 8 years. And finally, that organization was defunded because the healthcare system in America has been fixed, apparently.
Obviously.
So that job ended and I started freelancing and I started working with Erin. And all along, I've been going to the Nonprofit Technology Network conferences and just kind of just always learning and connecting with people. And those are some of my colleagues and clients and my business partner to this day is just really like rooted in loving to learn and finding community in that space and then just organically trying things and then continuing forward. So I never set out to be an entrepreneur. I'm completely an accidental entrepreneur.
Well, that's great. I never thought I would be either. You know, nobody in my family was an entrepreneur. My father worked at the same company from when he, graduated until he retired, right?
Yep. Same.
I didn't expect to be doing it, but I guess I'm a little too much of an independent thinker to just be a straight W-2 employee. So I'm sure you've learned a lot over the years, and you've mentioned some things, but if you could go back in time to when you started DevCollab, and give yourself some advice, what would you tell yourself?
Well, I thought about this, and I have they're a little contradictory, but in one way, I would say don't worry about planning everything. Like it take time to see what happens and experiment with it, and then learn from it and iterate on it. I think earlier in our business, I think I always have this fear that like we're not planning enough, like we're not thinking ahead enough. So I would tell myself it's okay that you're not planning everything. But I would also tell myself to really track everything that you do and decisions that you make and the why behind those decisions. Because as you get older and your brain's not going to remember things as well.
Nope.
And it's helpful to have the metrics to look back on and have that data to make, informed decisions. So things that you might not think as being relevant to you in 10 years, it actually might be relevant. So, do a better job tracking that.
Johanna, what about you?
I really don't know what I would tell myself. I think I would tell myself to have more confidence in doing business the way that Erin and I wanted to do business, even though it wasn't standard and it wasn't like normal and according to, all the business experts who mostly did not resemble us in any way. And just to know that, if something was working, I could continue forward with, and if it, adjust as needed. And, I felt I had some sense that it was possible to build a business that was not a little non-standard. It was in line with our values. But I wish I could go back and tell myself, like, yeah, you can. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise because they're going to try.
Yeah, I think both of those things are very good pieces of advice, right? Erin, lifelong learning, but documenting it so you can kind of reference it and remember it later. And yeah, I think both of those are great pieces of advice. So we're approaching the end of the power hour, but I'm also very curious to know kind of what you each like to do outside of work. So, Erin, do you have any, passions or hobbies you like to pursue outside of work?
Yeah, I do. And it ebbs and flows, I would say. I have two two children, two boys, 12 and 14. So parenting them is something I definitely do in my spare time. I enjoy producing theater and being involved in theater productions. We have a ski house, and we enjoy going skiing on the weekends and hiking in the summer. And so I try to get outdoors as much as I can.
That's great. Very active outdoors. I love it. Johanna, how about you?
Sure. Well, my child's about to go off to school. Um, so I'm not parenting as actively anymore, which has been really nice because I do have more time for other things that are not work. I live in a really beautiful rural place and I walk pretty much every day, miles and miles. I love music and in the past I've sung and played guitar. I go to music shows. Um, but mostly what I'm doing in my spare time now is returning to writing poetry. I took decades off from it, which is probably you're welcome, world. But now I'm back at it and I have a piece that's going to be published in an online magazine sometime in the next couple months. So, which is the first time that's happened for me. So I'm really excited about that. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I definitely could not write a single stanza of poetry or whatever you call it.
I'm not saying I can do it well. I'm just saying I'm doing it.
Yeah. Well, my kids, I've got boys who are about the same age as Erin's boys, and they're bringing home some poetry from school. So my kids are probably better poets than I am.
Awesome. I'd love to hear that.
If folks want to connect with you, for whatever reason, where can they find you? What's the best way?
Our website is DevCollaborative, which is too long of a name, but I didn't think it was going to stick. I thought it was a temporary name. DevCollaborative.com. We have a contact form there. You can also reach me and Erin at the same time by emailing hi, as in hi, at devcollaborative.com.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. You've covered so much great information about your approach to business and not being afraid to operate it, differently and go against the consensus advice. And so I think the audience has probably gotten a lot out of this conversation. So thank you both, Erin. Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Calvin. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. For those listening, if you learned something today, or you laughed about something, or got sad about something, please tell people about this podcast. Let's get this good information into other people's hands so they can learn from our guests as well. So thanks again, Erin and Johanna.
Thank you.
Take care.
This has been another exciting episode of the Marketing Agency Power Hour. We'll see you all next time. Another episode in the books. Thank you so much for tuning in. For show notes and more, please visit marketingagencypowerhour.com. This show is sponsored by SmartBooks, providing marketing agencies with bookkeeping, accounting, and finance support. With SmartBooks, you gain the clarity and confidence to make your agency a success. Until next time,